Hey everybody, welcome back to Open Book Games. This is Phil, and this is my first video about rules and mechanics for DMs and players. Today we're going to talk about why we have rules in the first place. Everywhere that you see Dungeons and Dragons in pop culture, be it Dexter's Laboratory or Community, My Little Pony, what else? Gravity Falls, uh, all kinds of TV shows, movies, The IT Crowd. There are a lot of jokes that get made about D&D pretty frequently. I think one of the most common, other than anything surrounding it just being for nerds, is about how complicated it is. Gravity Falls even goes so far as to call it homework the game. Um, so we're going to kind of talk about why that is. We all play a lot of games, and sometimes they have a lot of rules. Most of the time, they don't have that many. So why does Dungeons and Dragons, why do Pathfinder and any other role-playing game that you play, why do they have so many rules? And there's really four reasons. The first one comes down to how we resolve conflicts. It's about fairness. Without rules, a lot of times, if there's not a whole lot of trust and understanding between the players and the DMs, which takes time to build, uh, you kind of dissolve into arguments about what should and shouldn't happen, which very much depends on how you see the world and how you interpret what's happening. So the rules give us a way to resolve those arguments, to resolve any conflicts or anything where there is a chance for failure. That's one of the biggest things. Anything where there's a chance for failure, usually the rules are going to tell you how that's going to play out. So you don't have those yeah, huh, nah, arguments that you would have in an imagination in a make-believe game that you play as a kid, because we're grown-ups and we should be able to do better than that. Really, kids are usually able to do better than that, so be better than children. The next reason that we have it is for a sense of predictability. Not that rolling dice is really predictable, but if a player tries to do something, or if you try to do something with your villain or your NPC or just some mook, is that an okay word to say? We might censor that out. With your goons, I guess, with your monsters and thugs and everything like that, every time you try to do something, there should be a pretty consistent answer as to how you do that and how you determine whether or not it passes and fails. Now, that might sound like it's still resolving arguments, but it has more to do with the physics of the game, kind of or the metaphysics of the game. If you go outside and you throw something straight up in the air, barring it being very windy or that thing being very light, you expect it to come straight back down. And even if it is windy or light, it's going to come back down anyway at some point. You're not going to throw it far enough to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth, so it's coming back down. That's gravity. If I swing my sword in any of the D&D or Pathfinder games, I'm going to roll a d20 to see if I hit, unless it's a stationary object that I have no chance of missing. But even then, I'm probably going to roll it to see if I hit well enough to do damage. Those are the kinds of metaphysics, the predictability that I'm talking about here. It prevents unpleasant randomness. And by unpleasant randomness, I mean having to roll for everything when there isn't a chance to fail. You, barring the worst of circumstances, aren't going to make some grievous error brushing your teeth and stab yourself. That's not going to happen. You're not going to, and I made Rowan laugh. I don't know if you picked that up. You're typically picking something up. The worst thing that's going to happen is it slips out of your fingers and you spend an extra second picking it up. Borderlands 2 has a great play on this in one of their expansion content, where again, it's pop culture dealing with Dungeons and Dragons. There is a mini quest where you are attempting to essentially pick up a gun, and the player keeps rolling a natural one, and so the gun goes bouncing off to a completely different zone, and you essentially have to chase it down backwards through the zone, away from everything else you're doing. And they're really, I think, making a good point about some of those predictability issues. You should predictably be able to pick up a gun unless there are extenuating circumstances, or if there aren't guns in your games, a sword or something. If it's laying at your feet and you don't have actual butter on your fingers, shouldn't be that hard to deal with. Predictability. That's why we have rules. The next one is balance, and we'll probably have a lot of conversations about balance because it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I think, and this is an opinion, very much so, I think one of the most important things about balance isn't between you as the DM and your players, it's between the players and themselves. You as the DM can always cheat. You can wiggle things around a little bit. If they're having a really hard time, they're just rolling really low, scooch the HP of the monster down a little bit if they weren't meant to be a challenge. If they're just not able to hit something, lower the HP so that the fight doesn't just drag on. If they're just schooling the big bad evil guy because they're rolling super well, or maybe they had something prepared that you forgot about, well, you can have them have a convenient escape plan. We'll talk about that when we talk about adventure design, but balancing between the player and the DM usually isn't that tough, at least once you kind of know some of the tricks. What's difficult is balancing between the players because, for the most part, barring a conversation ahead of time and the players being all in agreement about it, nobody wants to be useless. And nobody except maybe the one person, if they're kind of egotistical, nobody wants to just be the powerhouse who's doing everything. Even with those overpowered characters, ideally you want them to have weaknesses that the other party members cover for. Everybody deserves a chance to feel like they did something useful. Really, they deserve a chance in the spotlight. Some players might get uncomfortable with that, but they should have a moment, maybe not every session, but pretty frequently, that they go away saying, remember when my character, remember when I did that, remember how I saved you, remember how I killed that thing, remember how I saved all our butts by, you know, charming the guards and making them forget about the murder hoboing we did. Every player deserves that, and the games exist to give us that balance. Now, balance on its own isn't enough because I'm going to give you a perfectly balanced system. If your players are complaining about balance, pop this system on there, no problems. Ready? Anytime that there is a chance for failure for anybody, you as the villain, you as an NPC, the players as characters, flip a coin. Heads they succeed, tails they fail. Perfectly balanced system. Doesn't get any simpler than that. But we've lost a lot. A lot of the rules that we change and that we mess with affect more than just one thing. So it's not enough to say that you want a perfectly balanced system because the fourth reason that the rules exist and the reason that the rules get so long, that we have so many books, that there's so much room for home brewing and for home ruling is that above all, we want differentiation. We want the characters to be different, to feel different. They're not going to get those moments in the spotlight other than random chance through that particular system of balance. So, in order for us to get that, we not only need a system that's balanced, where all the characters feel roughly equally powerful across the entire spectrum of things that they'll be doing in the game, they also need to feel like they can do something that the other players can't, that they have a role to play in the part. I mean, it's a role playing game, right? Maybe they didn't mean it like that, but they need to feel like there's a reason that they're here. There's a function for them on the team, and there's something that they can do better than everyone else or that nobody else in the party can do. That's why we have so many rules. That's why Pathfinder has pages upon pages of feats. That's why D&D 5 keeps coming out with subclasses and some new classes that get play tested. So glad they brought back the Artificer. Um, there's just That's why we have such massive rule books. It's not fun if everyone just gets a +1 sword. It's more fun if everyone gets something that's related to their character. So really, you'll find that if you take out the things that are meant to differentiate characters, then the rules aren't that big. Usually, each role playing game is going to have a section of the rules, maybe about that big. 30 pages for combat, maybe another 20 for spells, and I guess I should count the skills section in there because that usually has something in there. So maybe another 30 for that. That's still a big set of rules for a game, but it's way less than I'm going to use Pathfinder 2, for example, almost 700 pages that are in there. Most of that is there for player differentiation and an attempt to make them balanced. So that's why we have rules. We have it to resolve conflict and randomness. We have it so that the way that we resolve things is predictable, so that players kind of know what they're getting into when they decide what to do on their turns or out of combat. we have it for balance, and we have it for differentiation. Those two are closely linked. We'll probably end up talking about all of this stuff more because it all ties into things later. But it's important that we understand why we have the rules in the first place, because a lot of what we're going to talk about is the ways that we tweak the rules, the things that we change, the way we make players feel special. And we want to be sure that we're always thinking at least a little bit about how it's going to affect the reasons that we have rules. Anyway, if you can think of other reasons that we have rules, or if you have suggestions for other videos, questions, anything like that, feel free to give me a comment down below. And stay tuned. Next time, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the more popular systems and why you might want to use each one. I swear it's going to be some kind of massive system war in the comments, but I'm going to try and remain impartial. I have my own preferences, but we'll get to that. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.